Nobody was hurt. No weapon was ever shown. The whole thing took about 3 minutes, and at the end of it, the largest sum of cash ever taken in Japan was gone. A bank car carrying the winter bonuses for 4,500 factory workers is stopped on a quiet suburban road in western Tokyo by a young man on a white police motorcycle. He tells the 4 men inside that their branch manager's house has just been blown up and that there may be dynamite under their vehicle. He drops to the ground to look. Smoke pours out from beneath the car. He shouts at them to run, and they run, because 3 days earlier, that bank really had been threatened with a bombing. Then he gets into their car and drives away. He left behind roughly 120 things: a bike, a hunting cap, a raincoat turned inside out, fragments of newspaper a few millimeters across. Investigators would trace that newspaper down to 13,000 copies, and that cap down to 54. They would put 110,000 names on a suspect list and run 6 million fingerprint comparisons. The search would cost more than 3 times what was taken. 7 years later, the clock simply ran out, and the case closed itself. This is the most famous crime in Japan, and the strangest thing about it is not that he got away. It is what the hunt for him did to people who had nothing to do with it. To understand why 4 grown men climbed out of a car and ran, you have to understand the country they were standing in. Japan in 1968 is in the middle of the fastest economic expansion any nation had ever managed. Factories are running at full capacity, wages are climbing, and twice a year, in summer and in winter, companies pay a bonus that can be several months of salary in a single lump. The payment that funds the new year, the school fees, the family debts. That bonus moved as paper money. There were no bank transfers waiting at the other end, no cards, no digital ledger. On a fixed morning, in a fixed week, an ordinary sedan drove a fortune across the suburbs because that was simply how it was done. Anyone who watched the road on the same December morning 2 years running would have learned the schedule for free. And somebody had been watching for a long time. That spring, an agricultural cooperative in western Tokyo began receiving letters, 9 of them over 4 months, demands for money, threats to plant a bomb. Nothing came of them. Nobody was hurt, nobody paid, and the letters stopped. Then, on the 6th of December, an express letter arrived at the home of the manager of a bank branch in Kokubunji. It demanded 3 million yen. If the money was not left at a specified place by 5 o'clock the following afternoon, the letter said, his house would be blown up. The next day, around 50 officers waited at the drop point. Nobody came. Nobody was ever going to come. Handwriting specialists would later conclude that the letters to the cooperative and the letter to the bank manager were written by the same hand. What that hand was actually doing has never been established, but consider what it achieved. On the morning of the 10th of December, every employee of that branch already knew one thing for certain. Somebody out there was threatening to bomb them.
It is a cold, damp Tuesday morning. At around 9:15, a black Nissan Cedric pulls out of the Kokubunji branch of the Nippon Trust Bank. Inside are 4 men, a driver and 3 bank clerks, and 3 duralumin cases. The cases hold 294,307,500 yen. In Japanese, it gets rounded to a simpler phrase, 300 million, and that rounding is how the case got its name. It is the winter bonus for the workforce of the Toshiba factory in Fuchu, and it is due there that morning. The car turns onto a street called Gakuen-dori, School Road, which runs along the north wall of Fuchu Prison. It is a long, gray, featureless wall. There are no shops. There is almost nobody on the pavement. They are about 200 meters from the factory gate when a white police motorcycle comes up behind them and signals them to pull over. The rider is young. He is wearing a police uniform and a white helmet, and he speaks with complete authority. He tells them there has been an explosion at the Kokobunji branch manager's house. He tells them that dynamite may have been planted on this car and that they need to get out now. They get out. He goes down onto the wet road and slides underneath the vehicle. A few seconds later, white smoke and flame burst out from under the chassis. He shouts that it is going to explode. The four men scatter for cover behind the prison wall. He stands up, gets into the driver's seat, and drives off through a red light. By the time they understand what has happened, that the fire under the car was a road flare, that the machine abandoned at the curb is a repainted civilian bike with a biscuit tin bolted to it, the car is gone, and so is the money, and so is he. Not a shot was fired. No one was touched. The most valuable thing anyone had ever stolen in that country was taken with a costume, a sentence, and a piece of burning cardboard.
What follows is the largest criminal investigation Japan had ever mounted, and one of the most frustrating. It did not begin well. The response was routed to the wrong division, and the early hours were lost to confusion over who was actually running the case. But once it started, it did not stop for 7 years. Here is what the man left behind. The motorcycle was a Yamaha sports bike stolen 3 weeks earlier and repainted white. Its police fittings were homemade: a megaphone painted white, a stainless steel towel rail, a biscuit tin standing in for a document box, convincing at a glance from inside a car, absurd from 2 meters away. The bomb was a commercial road flare wrapped in copper wire, fitted with 2 magnets meant to hold it against the underside of the chassis. The magnets were too weak. It fell off. Investigators traced the model to a production run of about 4,190 units. Then there was the paper. Fragments of newsprint only a few millimeters across were recovered and identified, not just as a specific newspaper, but as a specific edition, the morning edition of the 6th of December, narrowed to roughly 13,485 copies distributed in that region of Tokyo. The extortion letters had been assembled from characters cut out of magazines and printed matter. A hunting cap was traced to a manufacturer in Osaka and a distribution run of about 54. A raincoat carried laundry marks. Saliva on a stamp gave a blood type. And there was a woman's earring, which has never been explained. Set against that, 110,000 names on the suspect list, 170,000 officer days in the field, 6 million fingerprint comparisons, reportedly run by a team of only 3 examiners. Over 7 years, the hunt consumed around 972 million yen, more than 3 times the sum that had been stolen. Of the money itself, about 2,000 notes had their serial numbers recorded before they left the bank. Not one of them has ever surfaced. Not in 1969, not in the decades since. They could narrow a newspaper to 13,000 copies. They could narrow a hat to 54. They could not narrow the man to 1.
11 days after the robbery, police released a portrait of the man they were looking for. It went up across the country, around 780,000 copies of it. It was described as a montage. It was not. It was a photograph, a real photograph of a real 19-year-old from the Tachikawa area who had come to the attention of investigators in the days after the crime and who was already dead when his face was posted nationwide. He had died on the 15th of December, 5 days after the robbery, before questioning had concluded. His death was ruled a suicide. He was never charged with anything. In law and in fact, he is not a guilty party. His family had not consented to the use of his photograph. The picture stayed in circulation for 6 years. In 1974, it was formally withdrawn and destroyed on the grounds that it was unreliable. By then, it had already done its work. 4 bank employees had said in the first days that the portrait resembled the writer. Within a week, they were conceding that their memories were vague. Later examination established something worse. At least one of the 4 could not have seen the writer's face at all because the window pillar of the car had been in the way. And a picture that unreliable was for 6 years the single most widely distributed image in Japan. In December 1969, a young driver from Fuchu was arrested, not for the robbery, but on an unrelated pretext, for the simple reason that he looked like the picture. His alibi was checked. It held. He was released without charge. The Japan Federation of Bar Associations later criticized how he had been treated in custody. He never recovered. Steady work never came back, and neither did his standing among the people around him. In 2008, 40 years after a crime he had nothing whatsoever to do with, he took his own life. 2 officers who worked the case are also reported to have died by their own hand under the weight of it. Nobody was hurt in the robbery. That is true. It is only true for 3 minutes of it. So, who was he? 7 years of work produced theories and no answers. These are the serious ones, and none of them has ever been proven. One theory holds that he acted entirely alone, a meticulous amateur with excellent local knowledge who spent months preparing, stole and repainted a bike, learned the bonus schedule, and moved through 4 separate vehicle sites across 3 towns by himself. Demanding, but not impossible. A second theory says there was more than one of them. A dark sedan was seen near the wooded ruins where the bank car was abandoned that morning. 4 months later, in a housing estate car park in Koganai, another car was found containing the 3 empty duralumin cases. And there is that earring. None of it is conclusive. The earring may have nothing to do with the crime at all. A third theory concerns the uniform. Whoever he was, he did not merely wear police clothing. He behaved like a police officer convincingly enough to move 4 adults out of a car in under a minute on a road where they had every reason to be careful. Some have argued that this points to someone who grew up close to that world. Others point out that police procedure in 1968 was visible to anyone who cared to watch, and that confidence is not evidence of anything. A fourth theory addresses the letters, that the same person wrote them and then carried out the robbery, escalating from extortion to execution. Handwriting analysis did link the letters to each other. Linking them to the man on the motorcycle is inference, not proof. And there is the cash itself.
In more than 50 years, not one recorded note has appeared. One reading is that it never re-entered circulation in Japan at all. The duller reading is that only about 1% of the total had its serial numbers recorded. The rest was ordinary, untraceable currency that could be spent anywhere, slowly, for the rest of a life. Over the decades, several people have publicly claimed to be the robber. Not one of them has produced a single detail that only the robber could know. Here is the part of this case that I think gets told backwards. Financially, this crime had no victim. The cash was fully insured. The insurer paid, and the risk had already been passed on to an international reinsurance syndicate, so the loss was ultimately absorbed abroad. Every single Toshiba worker received their winter bonus the following day, on time and in full. Nobody's New Year was ruined. In the narrowest accounting sense, it vanished from the ledger, and no individual human being was poorer for it. That is why this case is sometimes described as a robbery without a victim. And I think that description is exactly wrong, not because the theft cost more than people say, but because the search did. Count what the 7 years actually took. A dead teenager's face posted 780,000 times across a country without his family's permission for 6 years on the authority of witness memories that were already collapsing. One young man's entire adult life ended 40 years later by an arrest that was never even for this crime. 2 investigators, by their own report. 972 million yen from the public purse, again more than 3 times the sum that was taken. The robbery took a payday that insurance made whole by morning. The investigation took the things you cannot reimburse. Which brings me to the question everyone asks, was he a genius? I do not think the evidence supports it. Consider what a genius does not do. He does not leave 120 items at the scene. He does not attach his fake bomb with magnets too weak to hold it. He carries a hat from a production run of 54, or newsprint that can be narrowed to a single morning edition. Almost every thread the investigators pulled was one he handed them. What he had was not brilliance. It was one very good idea and the patience to build a stage for it. Look at the order of events. Letters to a cooperative in the spring, a motorcycle stolen in November, a bomb threat delivered to a bank manager's own home on the 6th of December, 50 officers standing in the cold on the 7th, waiting for a person who was never coming, and then the 10th. Read in that sequence, the letter of the 6th of December starts to look like something other than a demand for 3 million yen. It looks like the reason 4 men would believe a stranger 3 days later. It is inference. The connection has never been established, but it is the reading that makes the whole thing cohere. He did not need to be clever at the roadside. He only needed the people at the roadside to already be frightened of exactly the right thing. And that reframes the failure. The case did not go unsolved because the crime was unsolvable. It went unsolved because a system that could trace a cap to 54 buyers, put 3 people on 6 million fingerprints, chased a picture it knew was unreliable, and spent its 7 years on the wrong end of the problem. The man on the motorcycle understood one thing about human beings. The institution hunting him never quite understood itself. On the 10th of December, 1975, exactly 7 years to the day after a white motorcycle pulled out onto School Road, the criminal statute of limitations expired. 13 years after that, the window for any civil claim closed too. Whoever he was,
He became legally untouchable, first for the robbery, and then for everything that came after it. He would be in his late 70s or 80s now, if he is alive at all. He may have died decades ago, with the answer intact. No one has ever been convicted of this crime. No one has ever been charged. The young man whose photograph the whole country was asked to memorize was never a guilty party, and the driver whose life it ruined had nothing to do with any of it. What stays with me is the shape of it. 3 minutes of theater on a gray road beside a prison wall, executed by someone who left almost everything behind and still could not be found. And then 7 years of enormous, sincere, catastrophic effort that reached everyone except him. He needed one lie to be believable for about 90 seconds. He got it. Everything else in this story is the cost of that. What do you think? Was this the work of one patient amateur who got lucky at exactly the right moment, or of a group that has kept a perfect silence for more than 50 years? And how much of what happened afterwards was inevitable once 780,000 copies of The Wrong Face went up on the walls?